at least 4,000 years, India's social and religious structures have withstood invasion, famine, religious persecution, political upheavals, and many other cataclysms. Arappans, Aryans, Greeks, Huns, Muslim, Portuguese and French, amongst others, all in turn settled and shaped the Indian subcontinent, although perhaps none with greater impact than the British. Few other countries could claim to have a national identity with such a long history, and to describe India as a land of contrast is therefore to state the obvious. But change is inevitably taking place as modern technology is woven into the fabric of society, yet essentially rural India remains much the same as it has been for thousands of years. Even in fast-paced modern cities like Delhi, Mumbai and Bangalore, what appears to be a complete change of attitudes and lifestyle is only surface glass. Underneath, the age-old loyalties and obligations still rule, and possibly no other country has its religions so intertwined with every aspect of life. Coming to understand the Indians can be a long process, particularly for those educated in the Western liberal traditions, which is based on logic. For those people, Indian logic seems bizarre, convoluted, and even exasperating. Yet it encompasses a unique cosmology, which is holistic and coherent, as well as fascinating. India has been the birthplace of two of the world's greatest religions, Hinduism and Buddhism, and one of the smallest, Jainism. Buddhism and Jainism rose contemporary in the 6th century BC, at the time of social and religious ferment, both being reaction against the strictures of the Brahminical Hinduism. More recently, even Sikhism had its root in a Protestant movement. Islam swept in India from the north, introduced by the Arab traders. Today it is the largest minority religion in the land. Christianity arrived in southern India with Syrian immigrants, long before the first European even dropped anchor in this part of the world. And today, at least 18 million Indians belong to various Christian sects. India as a modern state is itself a relatively recent creation, which was born out of people's desire to throw off the joke of colonialism, and today is still as much a country of diversity as of unities. India has almost 1 billion people, 1/6 of the entire world population, in a land only 1/3 of the size like that of the United States, and where more than 1,000 between languages and dialects are spoken. Although therefore there are many different Indias, sometimes preventing the development of a national conscience, it's perhaps worth remembering that India has remained the world's biggest and perhaps boldest experiment in democracy in the last 50 years. The earliest human activity in the Indian subcontinent and the roots of the Indian civilization stretch back in time to pre-recorded history. The first evidence of agricultural settlement on the plains of the Indus Valley, the starting point of Indian modern history, is roughly contemporary with other developments like that of Egypt, Mesopotamia and Persia. This culture is called the Indus Valley Civilization. It existed along the Indus River, now in present-day Pakistan, and it was certainly one of the most fascinating yet mysterious culture of the ancient world. New fact now shows that the Indus civilization was part of a larger one, which has been called the Harappa civilization, and was even larger than pharaonic Egypt. It was named after the city of Harappa, which with the city of Mohenjo-Daro were the greatest achievement on this civilization. The Harappans were probably trade-oriented, luxury-conscious, and urban people. Their town planning and script indicated a degree of sophistication they had achieved. According to archaeologists, the object recovered from the Harappan site indicated the Harappans preceded and even influenced the Mesopotamian. Then around 2000 BC, Harappans began to decline. The causes of his downfall are not certain. One theory suggests that the Aryan people invaded this area. However, another theory, supported by more recent evidence, suggests that the inhabitants of the Indus Valley dispersed before the Aryans slowly entered the area as a nomadic people. One cause of the dispersal of the Harappan could have been a result of agricultural problems, topsoil erosion, depletion of nutrients from the soil, or a change in the course of the Indus River that may have forced these people to leave their town and move northeastward in search for a more fertile land. From around the 1500 BC onwards, these Aryan tribes from Afghanistan and Central Asia began filtering into northwest India through the fabled Khyber Pass in present-day Afghanistan. They took over the northern part of India. A nomadic pastoral society organized along tribal lines, the Aryans saw cattle as their chief wealth. Thus, the veneration given to the cows in India today can be traced back to these early times. It is believed that the Aryans brought with them the horse, developed the Sanskrit language, and made significant contribution into the religion of the times. All three factors were to play a fundamental role in shaping the Indian culture. Gradually the Aryans spread east and settled down to more sedentary occupation like agriculture. They created marvelous stories they told and sang for centuries. They composed the hymns of the four Vedas, their great philosophic poems that are at the heart of Hindu thought. A settled lifestyle brought in its wake also more complex form of government and social patterns. This period saw the evolution of the caste system and the emergence of kingdom and republics. Their social framework was composed mainly by groups that were in the beginning a division of occupation, and as such it was open and flexible. Much later, caste status and the corresponding occupation come to depend on birth, and change from one caste or occupation to another become far more difficult. It was during this uncertain period that India saw the rise of Hinduism, when the Vedas became the Hindu sacred scriptures and the caste system was formalized. After the Aryans, the country narrowly missed two major invasions from the west. The first from the Persian king Darius, who only annexed the Punjab, and later by Alexander the Great, then marching from Greece, turned back when he reached the present-day state of Himachal Pradesh, without further extending his power into India. After a long period of religious ferment that saw the rise of Hinduism on one side and the Buddhism and Jainism in opposition condemned in the caste system, what followed was the evolution of more complex society where tribal republic developed, giving eventually way to kingdoms. The first great Indian empire were the Mauryas, that spread across northern India and as far south as modern-day Karnataka. Its emperor, Ashoka, is considered one of the noblest and greatest rulers India and world has ever known, with his paternalistic policy at home and peaceful overture to other kings. He embraced Buddhism as the state religion, and even sending mission to carry the religion abroad. Following the decline of the Mauryan Empire in the early 7th century BC, a number of other powerful kingdoms arose in the north, central and south India, although they emerged completely separate. The Guptas in the north, the Cholas and others in the south. In the meantime, while Buddhism and Jainism were displacing Hinduism in central and northern India, Hinduism continues to flourish in the south. For a time, Buddhism and later Hinduism flourished even in countries like Indonesia, and the people of that region for a time looked towards India as the cultural mentor. Varanasi is the city that was founded by Shiva on the bank of the sacred Ganges and one of the oldest places in India. It has been for 2000 years the center of learning and civilization and claimed to be one of the oldest living cities in the world. Here Hindu pilgrims come to bath in this water, a ritual that according to their beliefs washes away all sin and sickness, and which is for them also an auspicious place to die. Life and death goes hand in hand in Varanasi, where smoke rising from the cremation ground signal, according to their religion, the final release of tormented souls in an unceasing cycle of death and rebirth. Western visitors since the Middle Ages have marveled at the strangeness of what is perhaps the most alien of Indian cities, its labyrinth of alleys too narrow for traffic, the thousands of sacred symbols, the sacred ritual, and the proximity of death. At sunrise, camera-flicking tourists peruse the water of the Ganges and the Ghats in amazement, while pilgrims continue their morning ritual without so much of a second glance.
अभिमुक्त वाराणसी चतुर्थानी गौरी पीठी तिलकंडक जिलाते भैरवी पीठी से विक्रम से महामंगल मासोत्तम मासे पुष्पासे कार्तिक देवता कार्तिक मासे कृष्ण पक्षे
At the beginning of the 11th century AD, a new enemy threatened India from the northwest, the Muslim. The first Muslim to settle in India were at the beginning traders in the 7th century, followed by more Turkish raids pushed out of Persia by the Mongols, resulting in the 12th century in the establishment of the Muslim Empire and the colonization of India. The Delhi Sultanates would be the major political force in northern India for the next 300 years. Although it never succeeded in welding together an all-Indian empire, the impact of Islam on Indian culture reverberated for centuries throughout the continent. Today, as a consequence, Hindus may dominate Indian society, but Muslims, some 10% of the population, today still forms a significant presence in almost every town, city and village. Around the 15th century, new hordes of Muslims invaded India from Afghanistan, Persia and Central Asia. The Mughals, whose name derives from Mongols in Persia, and whom were direct descendants of the Genghis Khan and Tamerlane dynasty, and whom will build an Islamic empire on the ruins of the Delhi Sultanate. The Mughals' age in India, although also only lasted for 3 centuries, was massive, covering at its height almost the entire Indian subcontinent. the impact of Islam on Indian culture has been inestimable. It permanently influenced the development of all areas of human endeavor: language, dress, cuisine, all the art forms, architectures and urban design, and social costume and values. Its significance was not only in size, however, as they presided over a golden age of art and literatures and had a passion for building, which resulted in some of the greatest architectures in India. The Mughals established a powerful policy and elaborate administrative and military structures and created a climate for the study of philosophy, history and art, blending Persian and Indian tradition together. The amazing achievement in the Mughals' architectural tradition owe much of the great talents to the Indian artisan and the wealth of material found in India, including the abundance of stone. The mosques they built are temples for communal prayers, which characteristic are the bulbous dome, the high minarets, always containing a niche indicating the direction of prayer to the Mecca. As firm reminder of Muslim dominance, mosques all over India display a bold linear grandeur, quite different from the delicacy of the Hindu temples. But their legacy also extends to other magnificent structures, as tombs, forts, and substantial remains of cities scattered throughout India. The great Mughal Emperor Akbar built the ghost city of Fatehpur Sikri in the 16th century as his new capital, for diverse reasons, one of which, its meager water supply, soon forced the emperor to shift his court back to Lahore. Now deserted, it is almost perfectly preserved, a masterpiece in sandstone. Although it only received a fraction of the visitor of Agra, the stunning elegance of its palaces and court ensures that it remains a powerful testimony of the Mughal grandeur. With the ascension of Shah Jahan to the throne came a flowering of architectures, both in Agra and Delhi. While red sandstone and brick remain major building material, the introduction of marble will be an expression of very high standard, elegance and luxury, which will govern all aspects of architectural projects throughout Shah Jahan's reign. The splendor of Agra, capital of India under the Mughal, together with Delhi and Jaipur in Rajasthan, are part of a golden triangle that forms India's most popular tourist itinerary, continuing to have a great and immediate impact on all who sees it. Agra as a city itself can be of an intense experience, even for a seasoned traveler, but pollution is appalling, the crowd at the major monument overwhelming, and the commission merchants and rickshaw wallahs are persistent as ever. The Taj Mahal represents undoubtedly the zenith of Mughal architectures and quite simply one of the world's most marvelous buildings. Looking at it, the glory of the monument is strangely undiminished by the crowd of 100,000 of tourists who daily visit the monument, making them as small and insignificant as ants in the face of this immense and captivating monument, with its ever-changing moods as the light changes from sunrise to sunset. Described as the most extravagant monument for love, this Mughal mausoleum has become the tourist emblem of India. It took 22 years and 20,000 people from India and Central Asia, as well as French and Italian, to build it. To some of them, in the hand, they had the hands and the thumbs amputated to ensure that perfection of the Taj could never be repeated. Modern scholars indicate that the Taj was intended as more than an elaborate mausoleum, as the extensive passage of Qurans inscribing the wall lends to believe to be a symbolic replica of the throne of God and the Garden of Paradise. As a stronghold of the Mughal Empire for a number of generations, the Agra fort still stands today in all of its magnificence, although much of the access is restricted and most of the masterpieces of the Mughal architectures are out of bounds to visitors. Construction of the massive red sandstone Agra fort on the bank of the river Yamuna was begun by the Emperor Akbar in 1565, though his grandson Shah Jahan, the builder of the Taj Mahal, had many earlier structures in the Agra fort dismantled in order to make room for his own marble pavilions. The most notable complex of white marble palace structures is situated in the eastern edge of the fortified wall built by Akbar. Along this is the Jasmine Tower, built at the point where the main northwest wall of the fort takes a turn toward the east. The octagonal room, which offers an exceptional view of the Taj Mahal, is supposed to be the place where Shah Jahan died in 1666, imprisoned by his own son, looking along the river to the final resting place of his beloved wife Mumtaz. In the meantime, during the 9th century AD in the north of India, a new Indus dynasty emerged, which will survive 5th century before falling also eventually to the Mughal onslaught. The Khajuraho temples were built by the Chandela creative genius between the years 950 and 1050 AD. Whatever the reason why those majestic temples were built in Khajuraho, a long way from anywhere and off the beaten track 1,000 years ago as it is today, we can only be thankful because the very remoteness helped preserve them from the desecration of the Muslim. The Mughals invaders, in fact, were only too ready to destroy what they thought were idolatrous temples anywhere in India. The temple are a superb example of Indo-Aryan architectures and amongst the most captivating temple sites in India. But it is its decoration with which they are embellished that have made Khajuraho famous. The artistic stonework is in fact, besides showing many aspects of Indian life a millennium ago, like goddess, warriors and musicians, depict also a number of erotic scenes running through the whole Kama Sutra of position and possibility. Many explanations have been attempted to the creation of the sculpture, but probably the reason is a simple one. The physical union of a man and a woman, the individual counterpart of cosmic creation, representing Shiva himself as the creator of the universe. How the Chandela have been chosen such a strange site to build, with nothing and of great interest and beauty to recommend it, where there was no great population, managed eventually to erect so many temples of such monumental size in just 100 years, there still remain a mystery. Nevertheless, they remain the masterpiece of Indian art. Vijayanagar, today called Hampi, was once the capital of one of the largest Hindu empires in the south of India. Having largely escaped the central rule from the north, and with the threat of Muslim invasion, an alliance of Hindu kingdoms made possible the formation of this great empire. Surrounded by 7 lines of fortification, Vijayanagar was reputed to have had a population of about 500,000 people and a mercenary army of over 1 million. Their wealth was based on the control of the spice trade in the south and the cotton industry in the southeast, and their religion was a hybrid of current Hindus, Jainis and Buddhists. Unfortunately, the empire came to an abrupt end in 1565 after a disastrous battle when the city was ransacked by a confederacy of sultans, which opened to the Muslim the conquest of southern India. Throughout the Mughal period, other strong Hindu powers thrived, most notably the Rajputs. Centred in Rajasthan, the Rajputs were a warrior caste with a strong and almost fanatical belief in a dictate of chivalry, both in battle and in the conduct of state affairs. Their place in Indian history is much like that of the knights in medieval Europe. They opposed every foreign incursion in their territory, but they were never united or sufficiently organized to be able to deal with superior forces. This eventually led them to be vassal state of the Mughal Empire. From the 8th to the 16th century, an important kingdom called Mewar formed, stretching from Gujarat to Ajmer. Chittagong or Chittor was its capital, an immense fortress which is reputed in present day to be the biggest in all of Asia. Crowning a 7-mile-long hill and covering 700 acres, with fortification, temples, tower and palaces, the seemingly impregnable Chittor during the 8th century was surrounded, overrun and sacked 3 times. In 1303, a Sultan of Delhi, in order to capture the beautiful Padmini, wife of one of the governors of Chittagong, besieged the fort with his armies. When eventually defeat seems inevitable, in textbook Rajput fashion, the men, wearing saffron robes of martyrdom, rode out of the fort to certain death, while women and children, including the Padmini, committed jawar or suicide, throwing themselves on a huge funeral pyre. In 1535 was the time the Sultan of Gujarat had besieged the fort, and once again the medieval dictate of chivalry determined the outcome. This time the carnage was immense, and it is believed that 13,000 Rajput women and 32,000 Rajput warriors died following the declaration of Jawar. The final sacking was 33 years later at the end of the Mughal Emperor Akbar, and once again, after an heroic resistance, the fort gates flung open and 8,000 orange-robed warriors rode out to their death. On this occasion, the ruler of Chittor fled and subsequently founded Udaipur, where he re-established his capital. Bikaner is an old desert town that was an important staging post on the great caravan routes. Its impressive fort was built between 1588 and 1593 by a general of the Mughal Emperor Akbar. The Lalghat Palace was instead built by the Maharaja Ganga Singh, and it's an imposing building with overhang balconies and delicate lattice work. "30 kilometers south of Bikaner lays the Kani Mata temple, where thousands of rats inhabit the temple and which are considered incarnation of mystic. The silver doors and the marble carving were donated by the Maharaja Ganga Singh. On the edge of a Thar desert, and one of the major cities closest to Pakistan, life in Jodhpur is dominated by the massive Mehrangarh fort, still almost completely encircled by the strong walls erected in the 1500s. The fort provided what must be the most authentic surviving test of the ceaseless round of war, honor and extravagance that characterized the Raipur's time. Jodhpur is also affectionately referred as the Blue City because of the indigo colors houses in the old part of town. Jaipur is the vibrant capital of Rajasthan and popularly known as the Pink City because of its pink-colored building in its old part of town. This buzzing metropolis is certainly a place of wild contrast and a feast for the eyes, with streets jam-packed with cars, rickshaws, bicycles, motorcycles, and pedestrians frantically dodging the crazy traffic. Jaipur is today one of the most polluted places in Rajasthan, but nevertheless seldom disappoint the first-time visitor. Udaipur, called the Venice of the East, possibly like no other city in Rajasthan, is incredibly romantic. Founded in 1568 after the final sacking of Chittagong, Udaipur rivals any other creation of the Mughals with its Raipur love of the whimsical and its superb crafted elegance. The Lake Palace is certainly the best example of this unique cultural explosion, but Udaipur is also full of other palaces, temples and havelis, ranging from the modest to the extravagant. The city has also managed to keep its head above the rising tide of hotels and terrace restaurants and remain one of Asia's most exotic spectacles. The British were not the first European to arrive in India, nor were the last to leave. Both is honor going to the Portuguese, whom captured Goa in 1510 and controlled it until 1961. In its heydays, the amount of trade flowing through and the beauty of Golden Goa was said to surpass those of Lisbon. In 1612, the British East Indian Company established their first post in Gujarat, soon followed by others in Chennai, Bengal and Bombay. Strange as it might seem, for nearly 250 years, a commercial trading company and not the British government will be the one that will be ruling British India. Although they were not the only European in India, as Danish, Dutch and French had also established their post, by the early 19th century, India was effectively under British control, both by the British government that had taken a more direct role in supervising Indian affairs, and the East Indian Company that was still administering the whole territory. While the country had remained a patchwork of nominal independent Indian states, a system of central government was established and the British organization replicated, a legacy that still exists today, giving India the advantage of reaching independence later with a more efficient and less corrupt administrative system than other ex-colonial countries. Since independence, India has faced many problems, but has also made considerable progress. Thanks in large part to the Green Revolution of the late 60s, Indian farmers can now feed the nation and export a surplus as well. India is today the second largest producer of rice in the world after Thailand. Industrial growth has been slower than that of some of its Asian neighbors, but it has generally been steady and has accelerated since the mid-80s, as Nehru's successor had begun to edge away from the socialism towards foreign investment and freer market. The failure of India's own brand of socialism revolved around the onerous control of the private sector that were choking the economy, as their leaders, although fostered by benevolent figures like Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru and nurtured by a parliamentary political system, never grasped that companies need to make a profit before they can help to create wealth and erase poverty. While in other countries such Thailand and Singapore, they develop export industries and welcome outside capital and millions of people have vaulted out of poverty, the result in India were, to say the least, sobering. In their obsession with achieving social equality and self-sufficiency, tragically their effort was translated into dubious policies which sinkered more the poverty-stricken people they were supposed to help. India business leaders share the blame for the debacles, as many of them acquiesced to massive regulation in return for an easy life, making shoddy goods that were protected from outside competition. Not until the sweeping market reforms of the 90s, mandated as part of the International Monetary Fund bailout, did India become its economical revival as a dynamic hub of software, internet, pharmaceutical and media concern. But even after India implemented reform, the government has remained lethargic. Nevertheless, the information age is igniting an Indian renaissance, and as every village gets connected to the outside world via cable, satellite and the net, bureaucrats are fast losing the control over the information that is essential to their power. India's great strength is the people, its great weakness the government, and its great hope is the internet. The social hierarchy of caste still handicaps millions of citizens, but the once powerless are beginning to find their voices, starting to make their number felt at the poll. The percentage of people living below the poverty line has been reduced, at least a little. The Indian middle class was a minuscule segment in the population in 1947. It is now as large, by one estimate, as the total population of the United States, determined to size a share of good life for themselves and for their children. Today, India boasts more millionaires than Germany. Perhaps, most remarkably, India has retained its faith in constitutional democracy in the face of crises of the kind that have sent other developing nations towards military dictatorship, in the face of national disaster, communal and political violence, one war with China and 3 with Pakistan, and the collapse of its close international ally, the Soviet Union. With the wealth of engineering talent, cheap labor, and one of the biggest domestic markets, India should be world-class in manufacturing as well as information services, without having to concede such powerful growth engine to neighboring China. If the next generation of Indian leaders can somehow reconcile the need of the poor with the ambition of those more fortunate people, then the dream of a prosperous united India may one day be fulfilled.